Welcome back to Why Walking Matters, the Science Explained, the podcast where we explore how something as simple as walking can have a powerful impact on your health, longevity, and quality of life. Today's episode is one I've been especially excited to record because we're looking at walking through a lens that most of us don't think about often, but should. My guest today is John Ashiru, a kinesiologist who specializes in the science of human movement. And if you've ever wondered things like, am I walking the right way? Why do my knees or hips hurt when I walk? Does posture really matter? And can walking actually prevent injury or improve the way your body moves over time? Then you're going to love this conversation. Kinesiology is all about how the body moves, how muscles, joints, posture, and mechanics work together. And walking, as it turns out, is one of the most revealing and powerful movement patterns we have. So today, we're going to break down what walking tells us about the body, what most people are doing wrong without realizing it, and how listeners can start walking smarter, not harder. John Ashiru, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to have you on the show.
Okay, hi, John Ashiru. Please introduce yourself. Tell us your title or role, what organization or institution you're with, and if there is a specialty that you practice.
Hi everyone. My name is John. I am a kinesiologist by trade, and I kind of work in a clinic and I focus on understanding how the human body works and how movement impacts pain. I particularly work with ICBC patients, and which is an insurance company for those who have been involved in motor vehicle accidents. So that's kind of where my clinical experience is at. I am very new to the field, so this is a pretty exciting opportunity for me.
Okay, good. Thanks. So, to start, I know you explained a little bit about movement, but can you explain what is kinesiology?
That's a very good question. Kinesiology is basically the science of human movement. It looks at how the body produces movement, obviously through the muscles and joints and the nervous system, and how that movement impacts health and performance, even in a sports aspect. So yeah, that's basically what kinesiology is.
Okay, and how did you come to this field? Why did you decide this was the profession for you?
For me, it was more of an obvious streamline. I played a lot of sports growing up, even in high school, and I acquired a lot of injuries through those sports and other activities. And for me, it was a way of almost self-rehabbing and understanding how my own body works, how my mechanics work, because I also have scoliosis too, so my mechanics are a little bit different than everybody else's. So for me,
Mm-hmm.
it was just understanding that and also reproducing that knowledge with other people and helping them out wherever they're in pain or they need not fixing but improvement in their mechanics also.
Okay, and how does kinesiology differ from physical therapy or sports medicine or even, say, personal training?
Good question. I would say physical therapy and kinesiology have a lot more similarities than just sports medicine. I think because we more go into exercise therapy and active rehab, we are allowed to, work on other things like some manual therapy if you're trained, shockwave therapy, therapeutic ultrasounds, and so on and so forth. But our main priority is movement and, exercise therapy. While with therapists, there is a bit of a shift now where they more do manual therapy and other passive modalities first, and then send them off to the kinesiologist. So that's where like the differences are quite similar but different. But with sports medicine, I think that's a completely not completely, but relatively different field. Mostly because I think their education is much higher, and most of them are more likely to be physicians. And
Okay.
personal training is more about performance.
So you mentioned that what you might find is that someone gets sent to a physical therapist, and after the physical therapist does their work, then they might send the person on to a kinesiologist. Can you go into a little bit more detail about what someone who has been referred from a physical therapist, um, like what additional therapy or work would they encounter when they come to see you?
That's another good question. Apart from exercise rehab, if given the opportunity, because all clinics are, but most clinics are different. They don't always allow their kids to use other modalities. But if you can, um, going into detail with therapeutic ultrasound and soft tissue release, which is something that I do, is more of an active manual therapy type of modality where the individual is moving through a range of motion, and we're using something that we call reciprocal inhibition to help with releasing the muscle in its elongated form. So that's at least going into detail with soft tissue release. You can also encounter other modalities like shock wave therapy, which uses a very big and loud machine that kind of releases the muscle a lot more. You can use heat packs, to relax the muscles, or cold packs to reduce inflammation, and so on and so forth. Really.
Okay. Would it look like a massage, like a really deep massage, but with the understanding that you have this um, deep understanding of how the muscles work and so forth?
Yeah, it would look a bit like a deep massage, but it does require like active movement from the patient or client, mostly because you're not trying to cross over into massage therapy territory. There's usually strict guidelines against that, but it will look like a deep massage with some active movement too.
Okay. So does the kinesiologist then guide the patient's movement as they work with the muscles?
Yes, they would.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I know that I'm not very familiar with the profession of kinesiology, so that's very helpful explanation. Thank you. Um, so here on this podcast, we talk about walking and the science of walking and the benefits of walking. And so, I guess the question to you is, does walking connect to kinesiology? And if so, how?
That's a good question. I would say walking does connect to kinesiology because it's our most fundamental way of moving. I find that us as humans have evolved to move much more efficiently through long distances, and you know, connecting different systems that have been integrated together, like the muscular system or the joint mechanics and balance and coordination, and even using the cardiovascular system. It really does surround kinesiology in of itself because it is human movement, right? Like one thing that I usually notice is that when walking is compromised, it obviously signals deeper issues and weaknesses and compensation patterns, which relatively ties into kinesiology.
Okay. You would say then, from a kinesiologist perspective, that walking is an important movement pattern.
Yes, I would say so.
So, what is the number one thing that you wish as a kinesiologist that the everyday person, the non kinesiologist, understood about walking and human movement?
I think one thing that I wish more people knew is that it's very beneficial in a lot of aspects. I would say, for example, it's very accessible and one can do it because if you relate it to other forms of health movements and going to the gym, it's very accessible. You can walk around anywhere. It's good for the joints because there's less stress on them. And it's a very sustainable movement that can help with your cardiovascular system. It can really help with your posture and spinal rotation. And you get a lot of core engagement, especially when you're walking for long distances. So it's very beneficial in a lot of ways. Especially when it comes to mobility. A lot of people tend to have very stiff joints and muscles because a lot of us live sedentary lifestyles. So it's very, very important, I would say.
Okay, so how does walking impact joint health over time?
There's a lot of different ways it can. I would say it does nourish the cartilage because it's through cyclical loading, and it does promote synovial fluid circulation because it is receiving a bit of impact, and it really does support the muscular stabilization. Those who go to the gym and, for example, the rotator cuff, know how important that is. The stabilizing muscles that allow you to do things without pain and with more strength than you would if you had them injured. So, yeah, very, very important.
That's great. Can you talk a little bit more about why the synovial fluid is important?
Yes, it's important because it's like almost like a lubricant that allows bone on bone to move around. So basically, in a joint, you'll have a capsule for the most part, and then you'll have synovial fluid and other membranes surrounding that. And that synovial fluid it lubricates and reduces friction, basically, and it almost also acts as a cushion and a nourisher. Right? It's just like how we have our blood going through our tissues and nourishing our tissues. It's also what nourishes, the joints.
Is there any sort of movement that would deplete the synovial fluid?
Um, there are some ways. I know that definitely with osteoarthritis or even rheumatoid arthritis, which is um, much more innate. Uh, a lot of impact can, damage the cartilage and by proxy affect the synovial fluid. Sometimes in some certain situations it can almost dry up, but I'm not
Mm-hmm.
too much of an expert in those areas, so I'm not really too sure how to answer that.
Okay, all right, that's fair. How does walking, in your opinion, compare to other forms of exercise in terms of building functional strength and mobility?
Um, I think it goes back to what I said compared to other exercises or trying other exercise forms. It is much more accessible and you can easily change your environment without much hassle rather than if you were to go to a gym and have to pay to do that consistently. It does have low stress on the joints, which is
Mm-hmm.
really good. I almost say that it's akin to hydrotherapy or exercising in water because there's less stress on the joints. So if an individual cannot wait there or put as much pressure on their joints as much, they can do that. It's very sustainable. You can walk for long distances, and you're more likely to be consistent
Mm-hmm.
when you're walking, I would say. So at least that's how I feel like it compares. And maybe in terms of maximum strength or power, it may not do as much, but it really is good for endurance. It's good for posture. It's good for circulation, even baseline conditioning.
So you mentioned earlier that you mainly work with patients who are in motor vehicle accidents. Um,
Mhm.
but do you also work with athletes or older adults or rehab patients at all?
Yes, I have worked with older adults in the past, and I find that walking is very, very beneficial to the older population. And this is also going back to my own personal experience. I've lived in, several different places where I was, for context, I was the minority, and I would see, maybe a predominantly Asian population or a predominantly Indian population, and their older adults do a lot of walking and a lot of Tai Chi. And no matter how old they are, they seem to have good mobility. They seem to be less stressed. They seem to be a lot happier. So, yeah, lots of benefits in the older population for sure.
Okay, and you attribute to some of what you see to their practice of
Yes.
walking as a general form of exercise. So, um, how do you evaluate whether someone's walking gait is healthy or inefficient? What are common issues that you see?
Um, wow, that's actually a pretty decent question. I think a lot of things that I would look for are symmetry.
Hmm.
So, symmetry between their stride length. I would see if maybe they're laterally flexing, which is just bending to side when they're walking. If their their upper chest or thorax is over their hip or behind their hip. There's a lot of things that you can really look out for. If their legs are more or hips are more internally rotated when they walk, if they walk with a limp, if their stance phase, which there's different phases in the gait cycle, is a lot shorter for one reason or the other. Maybe their arms swing less. But yes, there's lots of things to definitely look for.
And what are the biggest biomechanical mistakes people make when walking without realizing it?
I would say some of the biggest mistakes they make is definitely with stride length. Shorter stride length does affect how you walk in general. You seem to like walk a lot stiffer, right? Um, but mostly that could be due to most people living a sedentary lifestyle, or I don't want to say most, but a decent amount living a sedentary lifestyle. Sitting down a lot um, kind of causes the hip flexors to shorten. And
Hmm.
when that's shortened, the glutes are also weak because, sitting for a long time will do that. And then when you stand up, you want to almost overcompensate um, by hyperlordosis, which is just more arching in the low back.
Hmm.
And then, hamstrings are also tight too, right? So when you walk, you're a lot stiffer and your mechanics looks off. Even the posture looks off. So I would say definitely stride length or walking stiff is something that I would say is a pretty big mistake. If you permit me to say, another thing is posture in the upper body too. We all have smartphones. We all look at our phones even while we walk. So I feel like having your head forward is also a pretty big biomechanical issue as well.
So, do you believe walking can actually correct posture or movement imbalances?
Yes, I do believe so.
How?
Um, Also, I think because it activates the glutes and the core, which are very important things. Um, it can also maintain tissue tolerance to load and helps with the posture. I think, like I explained a few minutes ago, it does really help with posture. Your
Hmm.
erector spinae muscles are being actively worked, like keeping you upright and not flexing to the side or flexing forward. So very, very important in those aspects.
Why are core and glutes so important?
I would say they're important because when you typically walk, when you're swinging one leg forward, you're also extending the back leg further back.
Hmm.
And, when your core or your glutes are weak, it's hard to do that consistently. And that's why some people walk very stiff. Those two parts kind of keep the pelvis aligned,
Hmm.
especially the core. If your core isn't strong enough, it might have some biomechanical issues with being upright, along with other aspects. Because inherently, the lower back muscles are part of the core, which is something that a lot of people miss.
What are 1 to 3 walking tips you often give to people?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say try to walk according to your capacity. A lot of research will say maybe walk 7,000 to 10,000 steps a day, but I say just kind of be flexible depending on your schedule, depending on your physical ability. Just walk as much as you can, and it's very easy to multitask while walking. You can listen to a podcast while walking. You can talk to your family while walking. You can do a lot of things while walking. So walk according to your capacity and according to your schedule. But also consistency isn't perfection. Sometimes you may miss a day and that's okay. But I think just putting in effort alone will help a lot. So those are kind of my tips when it comes to walking.
Thanks. Your tips are well in line with the research that we have discovered here on the podcast as we learn together each week. Um, does knowing what you know about movement and gait and stride, do those things influence how you personally walk?
Actually, it does. I tend to be quite conscious of those things, and I think I have been for a while. I know there was a time back in the day where I used to walk with, my shoulders tight and hunched, or my back hunched. But now, it really does influence what I know because I want to practice what I preach, right? I want to be able to be an example to those who are listening to what I'm saying. So I am quite conscious, and it does affect how I walk and move in general.
And what does that look like?
What does that look like? It looks like me walking with an upright posture. It looks like me not, being on my phone or having my head hanging low when I'm walking and kind of being aware of my surroundings.
Okay, awesome. Uh, if you could prescribe walking like medicine, what would your ideal walking prescription look like for the average adult? And there may be some overlap in some of the answers you've already given, but I'd like you to prescribe walking as medicine.
Okay. Um, sure, we can do like a little bit on this. I would recommend, or at least from my clinical knowledge, I would recommend that you try to walk for about 30 to 45 minutes on most days. 150 minutes of exercise is good, but you can also incorporate walking as well. I would like for you to also break it into chunks if needed, just so it aligns to your schedule and just put in as much effort as possible, knowing that consistency isn't always perfection or is greater than perfection, really.
Okay, awesome. And a fun question for you. What is your personal relationship with walking? Like, do you have a favorite place to walk? Do you walk daily? What is your personal relationship to walking?
My personal relationship to walking is pretty substantial because I don't have a vehicle, just like if you're living in Egypt. Right, Vancouver is pretty close to that in terms of how things are structured. So walking to work, walking to get food, walking to even just to hang out with friends is pretty normal for me. I tend to like walking in parks because I just like to see nature and observe what's around me. So for me, that's quite therapeutic on a day-to-day basis.
All right. Well, thanks, Don. It's been very nice talking to you today. Do you have a website or any social media handles you'd like to share with the audience?
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Unfortunately, I don't have many social media handles. I'm not really on the internet as much as I should in terms of professionally. But I will say maybe looking me up on the Sports Med BC website will be nice. And I think that's the only thing I have for now. Or the BCAK website if you're looking for a kinesiologist. I should be there as well.
Okay. Can you share that URL? Just go right ahead and say, is it sportsmedbc.com?
Yeah, it's sportsmedbc.com.
Okay. And what's the other one?
The BCAK, which is the British Columbia Association of Kinesiologists. So
Okay.
basically, the bcak.bc.ca.
Okay. Awesome. And one last question. Are there any resources that you can suggest for listeners to check out?
I would say this podcast is an excellent resource to check out. Learn more about walking and the science of it.
All right. Well, thank you so much, John. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor.
This was such an insightful conversation, and I really appreciate John breaking down walking in a way that's both practical and science based. And if you're listening and today's episode made you think differently about how you walk, I hope it reminds you that walking isn't just something we do, it's a skill, and it's something we can improve over time. And the best part is, small adjustments can lead to big changes in how we feel, how we move, and how we age. John Ashiru is a kinesiologist in British Columbia, Canada. You can find him on sportsmedbc.com. And as a member of the British Columbia Association of Kinesiologists, you can find him on bcak.bc.ca. To everyone listening, thank you for tuning in to Why Walking Matters, the Science Explained. If you enjoyed this episode, be kind, share with a friend, and share your walking story as always with me at whywalkingmatters.com. Until next time, keep walking, keep moving, and remember, your health is built one step at a time.